Welcome to Small Practice Support Information Session number 39. In this Law Society of Ireland recording, Rory O'Neill talks to Justin Purcell about cybersecurity and the risk to client funds.
Very welcome to this Small Practice Information Session, Cybercrime and Risk to Client Money. I'm joined here by Rory O'Neill, who's an investigating accountant with the Law Society of Ireland. This is part of our cybersecurity series in conjunction with the Technology Committee. So Rory is a fellow of the Chartered Accountant and is an investigating accountant with the Law Society of Ireland. He is responsible for inspecting solicitors' practices for compliance with the Solicitors' Accounts Regulations and the Criminal Justice Money Laundering Terrorist Financing Amendment Act 2018 and the Regulation of Practice Committee. He's worked for over 10 years in private practice, gaining valuable experience in accounts preparation and audit of medium to size enterprises, including reports and practices. So Rory, you're very welcome to join us here today.
Thank you very much, Justin, and thanks to the Technology Committee for inviting me and also for setting up. I think it's a great initiative for the month of March, having the different speakers on cybercrime. Just to mention, and I know you will yourself, Justin, later, like there was Brian O'Mara spoke from the O'Leary Insurance 2 weeks ago, and I believe there's access to that talk. Some of it will overlap with what I'm going to say today, but his obviously was more focused on the insurance side of things. So I would recommend to everybody that they actually tune into that and have a look at it as well.
Today, so that's available at the Business Hub under information sessions or the Law Society YouTube channel, and we'll be sending out a link to them of this session and all the other sessions on Friday. So with your slides attached.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and also thank you to all the participants. Hopefully by the end of today, you will have gained some extra knowledge of what's happening out there to the profession. And what I would like to start with is just to go through a few examples of what we are getting reports of, what's been occurring in the last year or two. And of course, as I say that, my slides won't work, so my apologies for 1 second. There we are. So the vast majority of attacks that we're hearing about at the moment, all are these email spoofing type attacks. Now, there are many names on this. We've heard of CEO fraud, normally to do with, say, the partner sending an email to a bookkeeper. That's not the only type that solicitors are encountering. Also often known as Friday afternoon frauds. I don't like the phrase because people seem to think they'll only be attacked on a Friday afternoon, and unfortunately that's not the case. However, a lot of the attacks do occur when a solicitor may be under pressure to try and get transactions finished. And they're hopeful, the fraudsters are hopeful that because the solicitor is under pressure, they might miss out on a few of the signs that would have indicated that there was a fraud being perpetrated. So what is an email spoofing type fraud? It's basically where one of the parties, either the solicitor, the client, or a third party, receives an email from the other that appears to come from the other, but doesn't actually originate from that person. So there's two types. There's the external, which is, say, an email that's sent from the solicitor to the client, or appears to be sent from the solicitor to the client, or vice versa from the client to the solicitor. But it has also occurred between two firms of solicitors, one solicitor emailing the other in relation to maybe closing monies on a purchase, receiving the bank account details back. That appears to come from the other solicitor from the other side, but it's actually from a fraudster giving them fraudulent bank account details. And the other I'd like to speak about is just internal. A lot of people are, aware of these frauds with clients, etc., but they think that if they get to receive an email from, a colleague that's in the room next door, well, that has to be safe because we're within our secure network. Unfortunately, it's not. So I just want to give a couple of examples of that as well. So just to start with, we speak about a solicitor to client example. And I like this example mainly because the solicitor did everything that we would actually advise him to do. And I'm sure that doesn't give you much hope, knowing that if you follow the procedures, you could still be caught. But if I go through and then at the end, we can speak about how it might have been avoided. But basically the solicitor was acting on behalf of a purchaser. and had got to the stage of signing contracts and sent an email to the client to say, we're at that stage. I require you to make an appointment to come in and see me so that you can sign the contracts. And also I require the balance of the contract deposit. And let's say for argument's sake, it was approximately €20,000. Now the next line in that email to the client specifically stated, as a policy, we do not send our client account details by email. I will put them in the post to you today. And the solicitor, to his credit, went and did that. Now, a number of days later on in the week, the client had made an appointment to come in and see the solicitor, arrived in the offices, brought into the meeting room, and the solicitors thanked them for coming in, said we'd signed the contracts, but said, before we do that, I haven't received the money. And the solicitor said, oh, I sent that the other day. Or the client said that solicitor was, oh, I didn't see it in the online banking, but hold on, I go out and I'll just double check that it hasn't come in since. And as he was about to leave the office, the client stopped him and said, actually, I meant to ask you about that. Why do you have a bank account in the UK? Now, immediately the solicitor knew something was amiss, but was wondering how this could possibly happen. And as it transpired, this client brought in all their paperwork into the meeting with them in relation to the transaction. And they had within the paperwork a copy of the email from the solicitor in its original format stating we will never send our client account details to you by email. And a couple of hours later, there was a further email that appears to come from the solicitor saying, here are our client account details, and giving details of a bank account in the UK. The following day, the client received the letter from the solicitor. And that's where the solicitor in particular was quite disappointed, saying, first of all, you identified that I would most likely would not have an account in the UK. In fact, solicitors aren't allowed to hold client accounts in the UK, but most clients wouldn't be aware of that. But it did strike the client as being unusual. Why didn't they ring? Second of all, they got the email that said we'd never send it by email. Why did that not ring alarm bells? And thirdly, when they received the letter the following day with the correct bank account details, and the client would have noticed there were different bank accounts. Now it was an Irish bank. Why did they not ring then? And that the sooner such a fraud is notified to a bank, the better chance they have of freezing the money and you might recover it. But the client waited until they arrived in the office a few days later. Now the solicitor, and he actually rang me about it, and I remember running through the options with him, and his argument was, I could tell the client, this is all your fault. You know, you should have noticed that something was amiss, and you've paid the money out, so you're going to have to take the loss. But the solicitor's concerns at that point was the client would then badmouth them to all their local clients, etc., and it'd be, you know, damage to their reputation. They may lose some work, some clients, etc. So they didn't really want to take that path. They could go on to, you know, put a claim in on their insurance, but he figured, you know, after they pay the excess, the premium is likely to go up for the next couple of years. The amount would probably still come out as similar to the loss. So he decided what he'd do is he'd go back to the client and say, look, and I should mention, actually, the apologies, they did investigate their own IT systems, and they did realize that it was the practices email accounts that were compromised. So there was an element of contributory negligence there, that it was their system. The fraud couldn't have been perpetrated if the system hadn't been compromised. So he went to the client and asked for a 50-50 split. They both take a split halfway. Unfortunately, the client wouldn't accept that and has sued the solicitor since. Now, I haven't heard anything, but I know, and from listening to Brian O'Mara a couple of weeks ago as well, that would be covered by their insurers, the professional indemnity insurance or cyber insurance. But it gives an example of, you know, how you follow all the procedures, because they did specifically state they will not send it. One of the things I would suggest, and we'll speak about these later, different tips that I'll give later, but one of them was if you gave the client your bank account details at the very start of the transaction, they would have had that and they wouldn't have needed to wait on an email or a letter or anything like that. So at least they would have had it and possibly would have acted on that letter rather than the other. The other is the other steps I'm going to speak about in a few minutes that hopefully would stop the email account being compromised in the first place. So we'll speak about some of those protections you can put in place now in a moment. That happens vice versa. Say, for example, in a personal injury matter, you might have money that you've received the settlement, you're holding it in your client account, and you wish to send it to your client. And we have seen cases where a solicitor will have sent their client an email, say, settlement monies have been received. Can you provide me with your bank account details to transfer the money? They receive an email that purportedly comes from the client, but unfortunately it's actually originated with the fraudster with the fraudulent bank account details, and money is transferred to the wrong account. Another very simple step there, if the solicitor was the one who rang the client and verified those account details before transferring the money, that could have prevented it there. And then just to speak about the internal, because it leads on from that case, and I'll give you an example just to show how it does lead on. We became aware of a solicitor who was acting in the sale of a property on behalf of their client. And upon completion, there was a mortgage to be redeemed. The solicitor had been emailing the mortgage bank and had requested redemption figures. They received an email with the redemption figure and the bank account details to transfer the money to. The solicitor in this case, again, followed the right procedure, picked up the phone and rang the bank and clarified and verified the account details were correct. However, what they did then was they forwarded the email with the correct bank account details in it to the bookkeeper and asked him to set up the electronic transfer and to transfer the money. Unfortunately, it was that internal email that was intercepted, the account details changed and the money was gone. That fraud in itself actually occurred just before the Christmas break. So it wasn't until after the Christmas break that the client contacted solicitor to say that the bank had been in touch and the mortgage hadn't been redeemed. And when they investigated, they found out that this had happened. So the point coming out of that is that it's the person who sets up the transfers is the person who verifies the bank account. Or alternatively, if you don't want to put all that work on the bookkeeper, if a solicitor is to verify it, they print off the email with the bank account details, they ring the sender, verify the account details, sign the email, and then hand deliver it to the bookkeeper. Now, obviously, we're all working remotely at the moment. It makes it a lot more difficult that way. But if and when we do get back into our offices, that's another step that you could put in place just to ensure that the bookkeeper or whoever it is that's setting up those account details have the correct details in place. So, as I said, if we could stop all of these attacks at the start, that would prevent all of the cyber attacks. So unfortunately, it's not possible. But what we can do is put certain steps in place to stop it from happening. And what we have found is that all of these attacks that I'm giving you examples of, etc., all commence by receipt of a phishing email that's clicked on. So most people, I hope, at this stage would know what a phishing email is. The majority of the cases that we're seeing is one that would contain an attachment, and it could come in, for example, appearing to be a new client, asking you to review the attached document contract that they were considering purchasing a property, and would you review and give them a quote for the work to be done. You click on it, and it might even be a contract. You'll have a look through it. And then you send a quote back and you hear nothing more and you think, oh, obviously they never came to me. But it was actually, in fact, a fraudulent email. And when you clicked on the attachment, it installed a piece of malware on the machine that allowed them access to your email account system. Other ways of doing it is if you receive an email and it has a hyperlink. And I'll just give you an example. Say the practicing cert renewal that we've just gone through, you received emails from the Law Society. It could include a link to say, please click on the following link to be able to apply and pay for your practicing certificate. That link, even though sometimes they might actually bring you to what looks like a genuine website, is compromised. And what you will find, a little tip again, is if you hover your cursor over the hyperlink itself, it will automatically bring up where the link is bringing you to. So if you had received one from the Law Society in relation to practicing cert, as you hover over it, it will come up www.lawsociety.ie/practicing certificates / blah, blah, blah. So if something completely spurious comes up, you'll know immediately that this is a fraudulent website. So these are the type of emails that get in. So if we can stop them, we can stop the attacks. The first step in doing so is making sure you have your antivirus software, your firewalls turned on, all your operating system software up to date, etc. And just on that point, the majority of people, I'm sure, who's on the webinar today probably use Microsoft Windows in their office. I think the vast majority of practices that I've investigated anyway do. I've only come across a handful that use Apple. If you are using Microsoft Windows and you're on Windows 7, it'll work perfectly, but it's no longer supported by Microsoft. And what that means that if they discover some little loophole, a backdoor in the system, a weakness in their system, Microsoft would normally write code that would close off that weakness, and it will be automatically downloaded into your systems on a regular basis. But if you're on Windows 7 and it's not being supported, they won't write that code for that. And that's, you can say it's very cynical of them to make sure that you upgrade and you keep on buying their products, etc. But it is a fact that you need to be on a supported software. So if anybody is on an older than 7, Windows XP, etc., there was a very high profile case of Windows XP, if you used Internet Explorer at the same time, had a weakness. And a lot of people were still on XP when it was no longer supported. So people had to move at the time. And I think most moved up to Windows 7 at that time, but now they will also need to move up. And finally, as well, to include or to implement multi-factor authentication, I'd advise you contact your IT people to try and implement that. And what it is if you're accessing your emails from your normal work PC or your home PC, when you do it first time, you will get a code sent to your mobile phone. You enter that code and it'll work. If you ever need to access your email from any other computer, you can do so, but it will always send a code to your phone. So you have to have your phone with you to enter the code. So if a frauder tries to gain access into your email, it will send you a code. So you'll know immediately that somebody is trying to access your accounts that shouldn't be. So again, another way of detecting that there's something wrong. Try avoid clicking through emails. As I say, most of us receive our emails also on our phones now, our smartphones, and you can just scan through them by flicking to your right. The fear there is that you don't identify exactly, who it's coming from. Is it one that you would be expecting, or is it completely out of the blue? And if an email comes in that's completely out of the blue, that maybe from another firm of solicitors that you haven't dealt with in 5 years, and all of a sudden you're getting an email, you're going, God, what's this about? But if you're not actually paying attention, some of this might just kind of go over your head. So I would always recommend you close the email, come back out, look to see where the next email is coming from. Does anything look suspicious before you go back in? We all know about creating strong passwords. Every year they're released on the internet. The top 10 passwords are always password 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's amazing how many people use this, and I've come across it many a time when I am investigating practices. Password 1 is very, very popular. So what I would recommend is, you see the last line there, using a passphrase. There's one very famous on the internet, so please don't use it because everybody will know it. But if it just gives a good example of how you can change letters such as the A into the ampersand. You can use your capitals, use your symbols. You can change an O into the open and closed brackets or exclamation mark. You'll see there, dream of electric. They've dropped all the middle letters in the words dream and electric, so you only use the first and last. What I would recommend is that you use the words of maybe your favorite song, your favorite poem, the start of a book that you know, a prayer, anything that you remember has a few lines. You'll use the first line the first time, change a few of the letters into symbols, etc. And if you're changing your password every month, you can just move on to the second line of that song or whatever it might be. I would always highly recommend that you train all staff anybody who uses your IT system, not just solicitors, has to be your secretaries, your bookkeeper, you know, anybody who will use it and particularly uses emails, just to the dangers, as I've already mentioned, about verifying, hovering over your hyperlink just to see where it's going to bring you to. It's no good just you knowing it all and being hyper vigilant if one of your secretaries or assistant solicitors, whoever, isn't aware of it and goes and clicks on something. Your system is compromised regardless of how good you are. Just in relation to access, you know, make sure the staff just have access to the files, websites that they need to. If somebody leaves, make sure that their account is revoked. Get your IT people to come in to do that. Don't leave any active accounts there that aren't being used, that are there to be manipulated. Try not to use any additional removable media, USB keys, keep it to a minimum. Sometimes we have to use them when we're bringing stuff from home. Probably a little bit safer. If you have a safe one yourself, it's not too bad. You can bring it home, but not to just pick up any old USB that's left lying around the place, because it's been known for fraudsters to actually leave USBs left out in places, and somebody picks them up and sticks it into the machine, and the virus is on that gives them the access. And also then just always have a policy in place in relation to your cybercrime. Your staff are aware of it and that it's on your agenda every month. I'm sure everybody considers their fee income, their work in progress, any other staff issues, anything like that. Also consider cybersecurity on a monthly basis. Just make sure you're keeping everything up to date and everything is fine. Your antivirus is up to date, it's running, there's no issues, your backup plans are working properly, etc. And also have a disaster recovery plan with risk management. Identify who you contact in the bank, have their phone number ready. As I said, the sooner you get there, the better chance you have recovering money. Same with the guards, let them know, get your IT providers in to check out your system, clean it. And then also your PI insurers, if there's going to be a claim, they often require you to make a notification to the Law Society, so please contact ourselves, and also consider your data protection issues. And as I said, Brian O'Mara spoke 2 weeks ago very eloquently on cyber insurance and the differences of what's covered and what's not covered between your professional indemnity insurance and cyber. Just be aware that if there is a deficit in the client account, hopefully you should be able to cover it under your indemnity insurance, but it is your responsibility, and any shortfalls such as excesses, etc., is your responsibility to put back into the client account. And just a few more. These are 10 tips which the Technology Committee put together, and probably a couple of years ago, but they've been updated as time goes by. They're available on the website. They were actually in the Gazette in January and February. They've gone out in social media and e-zines, etc. So they're well available there. The main thing, and I've already touched on it, as much as possible, give your client your bank account details at the very start of a transaction and tell them not to send money anywhere but that bank account. Similarly, for your AML client due diligence, you have to get a copy of their passport or driver's license and verify their address. Ask them for a copy of their bank statement. You'll have their name, address at the top, so it does for your AML, and it also gives you their bank details, and tell them you will only send it to that account at the end. Finally, as well, I would recommend, if you're acting in a probate, that ask the executor to collate all the bank account details of beneficiaries and to hand deliver them to you. If you're dealing, as I've already mentioned, with other solicitors, often if it's a conveyance, put the bank account details into a special condition in the contract, say that upon closing, closing money should be sent to the client account details there. Post the contract to the other side rather than emailing it, because obviously that can be compromised. But again, it reduces the risk of relying on emails. If you do receive an email and you have to rely on it, as I've mentioned, you always make sure it's the person that is setting up the transfer who verifies that the bank account details are correct, or in that case, when we get back into the office, the staff member who verifies it on a printed copy and hand delivers that to the person who is authorizing the transfer. That's really all I have for today. Justin, I hope I haven't taken up too much time or anything.
No, not at all. It's very hard to get as much into such a limited amount of time.
Yeah, there's our details there. Obviously, more than welcome to contact us, the cybersecurity team. And there is the cybersecurity section of the website that has all these tips and more up on so people can review it there.
Sure. And what happens if somebody does get attacked? Do they need to contact the Law Society?
Generally, if the money has been sent from their client account, so there'll be a shortfall in their client account, even if they just go to the professional indemnity insurers to cover it, the insurers will require that you notify the Law Society. So we will hear of them that way. If it's the client who has sent money to the wrong place and there might not be, like there's no shortfall in the client account, we might not hear of it. And that's one of our fears, that we're not hearing of it that way. So we're not too sure. The others are ransomware attacks, which I haven't touched on today. It doesn't involve money, but for anybody who's not aware of ransomware attacks, it locks down your whole machine and they ask the criminals give you a certain sum of normally Bitcoins that you have to pay for them to release all your documents, etc. Again, we're not hearing about any of them at the moment, to be honest. A few years ago, we heard of a good few. We're hearing very few at the moment, although I hear that globally they are on the increase again. But I think it could be a case of people just aren't telling the Law Society.
Okay. And just on this bank, sharing of bank details, and Michael has indicated that really you should never share your bank details over email, as a never, never, never. And then the second question was, well, what happens if I post it out to somebody and then these guys intercept it? Does that go back to the first thing you said? You share it with them once in the meeting and then you never really share it again?
You mean that the post would be intercepted?
Yeah, is that?
Look, it can always happen, but like I will always say to people as well, cybercrime, it's just another form of crime. We've always had threats of burglary, etc., from the very start, and we always took steps to prevent an attack. So if you could think of it, many years ago, 50, 70 years ago, we often left the office door would be wide open. People could walk in and out. Then we started hearing of all these attacks. We started putting a lock on the door and people would have to be buzzed in. And now we're using CCTV. Obviously, there's alarms on the offices, etc. Checkbooks used to be locked away into filing cabinets. So there was always a risk there. And there is a risk, obviously, that a letter going out to your client could be intercepted. But the risk of that being intercepted compared to a risk of an email is so minimal, because as you can imagine, one thing about cyber is that the person doesn't have to be near you. Often they're not even in the country. So, you know, a lot of these being perpetrated from outside the jurisdiction, which makes it hard for the Gardaí to prosecute them, because they're dealing with so many different jurisdictions. But when you think of the post being intercepted, it's more likely that, you know.
There's a request there for a few more examples that you might have. I had one with regards to multi-factor authentication, that they seem to be spoofing that at the moment. So just be careful if you're receiving unsolicited emails to do a multi-factor authent, that they're created sort of like an impersonation of the Microsoft 365. So just be aware of that. So just be very careful when you're handing over your information at the moment. And I suppose just in summary, Rory, we're coming to the end of the session now, but I just want to make a special request. If anyone receives the business recovery survey, which there's a reminder going out today, that if they would send it back to us, that would be great. It comes from Deirdre at Crow, so it's a third party. So it takes about 15 minutes to complete. And if you don't receive one, please contact me directly. So Rory, do you have a few final comments there? There's one or two more questions, but
there's more questions if you want to ask. But
yeah. Firm where I worked used the special conditions in the contract of sale and employed a policy of verifying bank account details over the phone. Has there ever been a case of someone verifying bank account details over the phone who turned out to be a fraudster themselves?
Not that we're aware of. We always do recommend that, and I think it's in the 10 steps as well from the technology committee, that when you are ringing, say, another firm of solicitors to verify it, don't go by the phone number that's in the email itself. So you probably have that other firm of solicitors' contact details anyway, but double check them on the website before ringing them, so you know you are speaking to the correct person. But it is a risk, obviously, and we know of phishing scams where they ring and pretend that they're from a bank, etc. So you think you're ringing back the bank, but you're actually ringing the fraudster. So there is a risk there, but we would always recommend that you contact using, say, the law directory or just even Google the firm's own website to get their contact details. Or the same with your client, you probably have their contact details from the very start. So don't rely on the phone number that's given in the email itself.
Yeah, very good. So next week we're joined by Stephen Keogh, and it's entitled "How Safe Is Your Front Door?" Effectively your office, and he's going to do a walkthrough of other prevention measures that you can take in your practice. So, and that will conclude the cybersecurity series. So Rory, a big thank you to sharing your information with us today. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I think we could go on. I think the message out there is, like, think twice and hard about sharing any information with anybody if you're not sure who they are. Don't hesitate, pick up the phone, call people. Don't be sending out stray information, and be prepared. Think about it and talk through it. And if you do get attacked, have a recovery plan and a set of actions that you take immediately. So Rory, many thanks. Unless you have anything else to add, thanks everybody for joining us today at the Small Practice Information Session.
Thank you all.
So Rory, you're getting a lot of real positive feedback there. Thanks, Rory. Fantastic and practical as usual. So thanks very much, Dermot. And
thank you.
Good work from Michael. So thanks very much, everybody. Slán. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye.